Did you know that even now, in the 21st century, there are islands almost nobody will ever set foot on? Some take a week or more to reach by boat. Others require a research vessel, months of planning, and a weather window that might never come. For most of us, Google Earth is the closest we will ever get to them. Welcome to a list of the most remote islands on the planet. Island number 2 is almost entirely buried under glacier, and no ship has ever found a safe place to land. Island number 3 was shaped by a violent, isolated history most people have never heard of. Island number 4 looks like nowhere else on Earth, because its plants evolved completely alone. And the final entry features 2 islands that sit within sight of each other, yet belong to 2 different countries and, for part of the year, 2 different days entirely. But first, let's start with number 1. Far out in the South Atlantic, thousands of kilometers from the nearest continent, a green volcanic cone rises alone from the ocean. This is island number 1. Tristan da Cunha is the most remote inhabited island on Earth. It sits around 2,800 kilometers or 1,750 miles from South Africa and even farther from South America. Zoom in on Google Earth and you'll find a small green cone sitting completely alone in a vast, dark ocean with no other land visible for hundreds of kilometers in any direction. There is no airport. The only way to reach Tristan da Cunha is by boat, and that boat only makes the journey from Cape Town a handful of times a year. The crossing takes about a week, and rough seas can delay it further. Around 250 people live on the island permanently, most of them descendants of the original settlers from the 1800s. They farm, fish, and wait for supply ships the way people did 2 centuries ago. Tristan da Cunha proves that even today, remote doesn't mean uninhabited. It just means the outside world has to work a lot harder to reach you. Nearly 2,000 kilometers south of Tristan da Cunha, the water gets colder, emptier, and far less forgiving. This is island number 2. Bouvet Island is the most remote uninhabited island in the world. It sits more than 2,200 kilometers or 1,400 miles from the nearest landmass in the freezing waters of the South Atlantic. On Google Earth, it shows up as a white, glacier-covered mass with almost no bare rock visible, surrounded by dark, hostile ocean. Almost the entire island is buried under ice, and its coastline is nearly all sheer cliff. There is no natural harbor and no safe place for a ship to dock. A handful of scientific expeditions have landed here using helicopters, but most attempts to approach by sea have failed. Bouvet Island has no permanent residents, no history of habitation, and barely any recorded human visits at all. No settlers ever tried to stay. No shipwreck survivors ever washed ashore and lived to tell about it. Bouvet Island simply sits there, unclaimed, the way it always has. Not every island earns its isolation through ice and distance. Some earn it through what happened after people actually arrived. This is island number 3. Clipperton Island is an uninhabited coral atoll far off the coast of Mexico. On Google Earth, it shows up as a thin ring of coral wrapped around a shallow lagoon, sitting completely alone, far from any regular shipping route. In the early 1900s, a small group of settlers was left on the island to maintain a lighthouse and a guano mining operation. When supply ships stopped arriving, they were slowly cut off from everyone. Food ran out. Disease spread. Eventually, one man declared himself ruler of the island and terrorized the handful of survivors left with him before the women he'd been holding captive finally killed him. When a passing ship reached the island years later, only a few survivors remained. Nobody chose to remember Clipperton for its coral or its lagoon. They remembered it for what isolation did to the people trapped inside it. Isolation doesn't always break things. Sometimes it just lets them grow into something the rest of the world has never seen. This is island number 4. Socotra sits off the coast of Yemen, cut off from the mainland long enough that its plant life evolved in near total isolation. On Google Earth, it's a rugged mountainous landmass dotted with strange umbrella-shaped silhouettes unlike anything on the nearby continent. Around a third of Socotra's plant species exist nowhere else on Earth, including the dragon's blood tree, which looks more like something from a science fiction film than a real tree. Political instability in the region and the lack of infrastructure make the island difficult, and sometimes dangerous, to visit, even though it isn't physically as remote as some other islands on this list. Millions of years of separation did what no gardener ever could. It built a place that looks like it grew on a different planet, then left it here, in plain sight, for anyone brave enough to reach it. Further south, the weather stops cooperating almost entirely, and the water turns against anyone who tries to cross it. This is island number 5. Campbell Island lies south of New Zealand, deep in the subantarctic, battered by some of the strongest winds and roughest seas anywhere on Earth. On Google Earth, it appears as a jagged green outline surrounded by turbulent grey-blue water. The island is protected as a nature reserve, and ordinary visitors aren't permitted to land without special authorization. It's home to enormous colonies of seabirds, including albatrosses, that nest nowhere else in such numbers. The same brutal weather that makes Campbell Island nearly impossible to reach is exactly what has kept it undisturbed for so long. The storms that keep people away are the same storms that let the albatrosses claim the island entirely for themselves. Far to the north, in a cold and empty stretch of the Bering Sea, a much smaller experiment went badly wrong. This is island number 6. St. Matthew Island sits alone in the Bering Sea, hundreds of kilometers from the nearest Alaskan village. On Google Earth, it looks like a long, empty strip of tundra surrounded by open ocean, with no visible settlement anywhere on it. In the 1940s, a small US Coast Guard station released a handful of reindeer onto the island as an emergency food supply. When the station closed, the reindeer were left behind with no predators and no one managing their numbers. Within 2 decades, the herd exploded into the thousands, stripped the island's food supply bare, and then collapsed almost entirely in a single brutal winter. Today, St. Matthew Island remains uninhabited, visited only rarely by scientists studying what happened there. 29 reindeer arrived on a supply barge. Only a handful of skeletons were left to explain what happened next. From a graveyard of reindeer bones, we move into some of the emptiest ocean on the map, to a research outpost most people will never even hear of. This is island number 7. Amsterdam Island is a French territory sitting alone in the southern Indian Ocean, thousands of kilometers from the nearest continent. On Google Earth, it's a small volcanic dot, surrounded by nothing but open sea in every direction. There's no regular transport to the island. The only way in is aboard a supply and research vessel that visits a handful of times a year, carrying scientists who study the island's wildlife and weather patterns. Even reaching the island doesn't guarantee landing. Rough seas can force a ship to turn back after weeks of travel. Most maps of the world look complete. Amsterdam Island is proof that huge parts of the ocean are still just empty space with a name attached to them. And that brings us to the final entry on this list. Not one remote island, but 2 sitting close enough to wave at each other across the water. This is island number 8. Big Diomede and Little Diomede sit in the Bering Strait, less than 4 kilometers apart. On Google Earth, they look like 2 small landmasses facing each other across a narrow, often frozen channel. Big Diomede belongs to Russia. Little Diomede belongs to the United States. Between them runs the international dateline, which means that despite being close enough to see each other clearly, the 2 islands can be almost a full day apart, around 21 hours depending on the time of year. Stand on one island, look across the water, and you're looking not just into another country but almost into tomorrow or yesterday. 2 islands close enough to shout across, separated by almost an entire day. Not by an ocean, just by a line someone drew on a map. And that's 8 islands that prove how much of this planet remains almost entirely out of reach, even now. Some are guarded by ice, some by distance, some by history, and one by nothing more than an invisible line in time. None of them asked to be left alone. They just were, and somehow that's what kept them intact. Which of these islands would you be least willing to visit? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this, make sure to like and subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel keep exploring places like these. Thanks for watching.